Good afternoon and welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. Thank you for stopping by. Let me start with a tweet from Mr. Nicoletos. It's the dollar's stupid, rehashing, it's the economy stupid. That was James Carville during the time of Bill Clinton, and indeed it is. And it's really, I saw a report from Morgan Stanley saying, that this rally was based on, sand, and I have to disagree. I mean, any news that's coming, even a possible impeachment, is doing nothing to put a chink in the dollar's armor. My article, which we've already been through, but I'll just go over a few points over the weekend, was "The End Is Nigh." And why that keeps coming to my mind, when I was a teenager and at school in England at Westminster School, on the weekend I used to enjoy walking from Westminster to Speaker's Corner. And it was a lovely walk. You go past through St James's Park and Green Park and Hyde Park and eventually get to Speaker's Corner. In those days, of course, the Iranian Revolution was happening, and it was full of Iranians and all sorts of characters, and it was the equivalent of probably the House of Commons television at the moment, unputdownable. But I remember a time, I must have been 14, and wherever I turned as I walked back, and I'd come quite often via Trafalgar Square, 10 Downing Street and back to school, I kept seeing this individual with "The End Is Nigh" on his front and on his back, and he'd keep popping up everywhere. And it was a little bit like a Paul Auster novel, and therefore he keeps coming back to my mind. But the point I'm going to touch on now is really, well, first of all, let me pick up on Rouhani, who skipped his handshake with Trump, delivered his message via Fox News. Now they're practically admitting that they were behind the attack in Saudi Arabia, and it speaks to their supreme confidence at this moment in time, which I think people are underestimating. Trump, I said, obviously found Unger a little overwhelming, had his security detail block a 16-year-old girl, and then did a J. Alfred Prufrock impression, like a patient etherized upon a table. He kept calling Jeb Bush low-energy Jeb. It's now low-energy Trump, I've got to admit. And then I was talking about the markets. I said Saudi propaganda was effective in bringing the price of oil right back down after a 20% surge 2 weeks ago. And we also sold off big time yesterday, but my point is, it's a bluff, and the oil price is going higher, and I'll come to the situation in Saudi Arabia in a little bit. So I'm a bull on oil, and I think this is an opportunity to pick it up cheap. The dollar, I said, has been girding its loins and is set to explode. Buy the dollar. I see no reason to change that opinion. If anything, I'm even more convinced. I also said safe havens like gold and the new 21st century safe haven Bitcoin, trading like everybody is long and very crowded. It looks set to deteriorate. Gold currently just below 1460. Bitcoin counterintuitively, which is its wont to do, bounced, and we're currently at 8,410. But dead cats don't bounce very high. So let's see where we'll go, but I think we'll be headed lower momentarily. I also said President Xi will have to let the renminbi go, sell the renminbi, and that currently is at 71532. That is a great trade in my view. I said they will hold it steady this week because the CCP is celebrating 70 years of the People's Republic, but when the party is over, it will be an almighty hangover. Indeed it will. And I said you can also sell sterling because the United Kingdom is crashing out of Europe. But, I am inclining to the view that even if they crash out, what does it really mean? They're still going to have to negotiate with the Europeans, but that's by the by. For now, a hard Brexit will be negative for the currency. And I said parity is calling in the case of the euro, that's at 1,00865. Returning to Trump like a patient etherized upon a table, I go back to something that I was writing about in December, at the end of December last year. He's trapped, Murphy told the Washington Post. He's playing poker, holding 2 threes, and suddenly putting all of his chips in. It's pure emotion, the mark of a panicking amateur. And it really is. It's quite extraordinary. I was thinking back to Clinton. Clinton, when he was similarly being impeached, was so on message. And you've got a Shakespearean fellow here with Trump. Really, his own personality is going to prove his downfall, his inability to shut up, and his ability to keep dropping himself in it. As I said, Trump found it a little overwhelming, had his security detail block a 16-year-old girl, Greta Thunberg, and then did a J. Alfred Prufrock. And that is a super poem as well by T.S. Eliot. Let us go, then you and I, when the evening is spread out against the sky, like a patient etherized upon a table, let us go. Through certain half-deserted streets, the muttering retreats of restless nights in one-night cheap hotels and sawdust restaurants with oyster shells, streets that follow like a tedious argument of insidious intent to lead you to an overwhelming question. Oh, do not ask, what is it? Let us go and make our visit. And indeed there will be time to wonder, do I dare and do I dare? Time to turn back and descend the stair with a bald spot in the middle of my hair. They will say how his hair is growing thin, till human voices wake us and we drown. The end is nigh. Pakistan's Prime Minister is seen engaging in an animated discussion with Vladimir Putin in this video. He really made a very effective intervention at Unga. I must give him credit for that. 13th of August, I was writing about the feedback loop phenomenon, and I said the most important currency to watch right now is the Chinese renminbi, and nothing is changing my mind. We're now above 715, and we have not closed here since September the 3rd, according to the Marketeer, who I must admit have proven a stupendous resource, and I commend them for that. Thank you. This is a photograph by David Yarrow of Pride Rock. The artwork combines 2 photographs, one taken in Borana, Kenya, from above Pride Rock, and the other taken 4,000 kilometers south at Lion Whispers, famous lion sanctuary, where we created a massive replica, he says, of Pride Rock. Borana Ranch I visited, and Hannah swam, as did I, in the pool, which is 2,000 meters above the sea, and it is cold. Of course, this was some years ago, and my Hannah is now in the United Kingdom at school, and I miss her, I told her. She used to bang the door quite often, and I told her yesterday I miss the banging. And this is another photograph we took when we visited of the snow peaks of Mount Kenya in the background and elephants in the foreground. It really is a tremendous place to visit. Political reflections, I take you back to the 27th of May when I said, in one fell swoop, President Xi Jinping was president for life. And I said he's on a pedestal, and he's put himself there, and he's then faced with the strongman conundrum. He is the only decider. there's only one decider in China, and that is him, and that announcement was carried in March 2018. The Central Committee of the Communist Party of China proposed to remove the expression that the President and Vice President of the People's Republic of China should serve no more than 2 consecutive terms from the country's constitution. In one swell swoop, President Xi Jinping was president for life, and he is on a pedestal and is faced with the strongman conundrum. The political brand will not permit a retreat, let alone a surrender. Friedrich Wu, a professor at Nanyang Technological University in Singapore, sums up the feelings of many when he describes them, this is Trump's demands, as a list of surrender demands for China to acquiesce to. A strong man can't acquiesce to a list of surrender demands, that's the point. If there is a decoupling between the 2 economies, so be it. The Chinese people can endure more pain than the spoiled and hubristic Americans, is the view from China. They're celebrating the 70th anniversary. No force can stop the Chinese people and the Chinese nation forging ahead, he said, speaking at the start of the 70th anniversary of the military parade, stresses unity of all ethnicities. I'm sure they'd like to respond to that. China as one projects confidence in achievements. No force can stop the Chinese people and the Chinese nation forging ahead, he said. In this clip from Global Times, National Day Parade supersonic cruise missile CJ-100 makes its first appearance on the military parade. This was rather good. Women militia soldiers parade on the 70th anniversary of Communist China. This is from TikTok. Long live the great People's Republic of China, long live the great Communist Party of China, long live the great Chinese people, he declares before the parade begins. 27th of May this year, I said that the Chinese-US war is going to turn ballistic. 9th of July last year, I asked tariff wars, who blinks first? I think that question remains pertinent. Unity is iron and steel, unity is a source of strength, he said. Complete reunification of the motherland is an inevitable trend, and no one and no force can ever stop it, he said. Pankaj Mishra, who's a wonderful writer that I read before and I got in touch with him, I must get in touch with him again. Writing in Bloomberg Opinion, China deserves more than a parade, is the headline. The Communist Party of China celebrates the 70th anniversary of its rule today. The pomp and pageantry include a parade past Beijing's Tiananmen Square that will involve 15,000 soldiers and sailors, 160 planes, 580 tanks and other weaponry. Chinese leader Xi Jinping obviously hopes to project national power and confidence on a grand scale. There's a Don DeLillo quote about that, I've forgotten. The promise made by Mao Zedong on the founding of the People's Republic of China on October the 1st, 1949, they have stood up. Just 3 decades ago, China, with its near destitute millions, seemed a hopelessly backward nation. Today, in the most startling national transformation of the modern era, it is a global economic powerhouse, a fact evidenced by, among other things, President Trump's obsessive and self-defeating efforts to penalize China, says Pankaj. China triumphantly upholds a model of technocratic authoritarianism. Xi may impress some with the display of Chinese military hardware, but the nationalism he seeks to turn into a civil religion is not only felt to be oppressive by many people, whether Muslims in Xinjiang, Buddhists in Tibet, or protesters in Hong Kong, it is also profoundly derivative without Chinese characteristics. Then he turns to Sun Yat-sen. Towards the end of his life, he warned his compatriots against adopting an idea of civilization developed in the West which when applied to society will mean the cult of force with aeroplanes, bombs and cannons as its outstanding features. After all, the Qing Empire was able to accommodate self-rule by minority groups arguably better than the Western model of the nation-state, which from Quebec to Kashmir and Xinjiang seeks aggressively to integrate ethnic, religious and linguistic minorities and mostly manages to alienate them. That's a very good point. So China deserves more than a parade. This photograph is from Kevin Fryer, Getty Images. China's leaders, led by President Xi Jinping, enter to watch the 56-gun salute. That's from TikTok. Former President Jiang Zemin also makes an appearance during the 70th National Day military parade. At the same time, Hong Kong is celebrating the National Day by locking down the city, shutting down the malls and deploying riot police on nearly every street corner. Today Xinjiang, tomorrow Hong Kong is not an exaggeration, says Nathan Law KC. 19th of August, I said the periphery is a tinderbox in many parts of the world. I was citing Xinjiang in China is also under lockdown and a 21st century experiment in terms of dystopian technocratic control. I also said, and I might be proven wrong, that I thought it was not possible to Xinjiang Hong Kong, and also that the frontier from Xinjiang to Kashmir, from Gaza to Crimea, from Hong Kong to Taiwan, are 21st century flashpoints, which what Pankaj is also saying. Let's move on from that grand set piece to this. Is this sane? This is Trump's tweet. I want to meet my whistleblower accuser. I want to punish him badly. I think we should have a civil war if I'm impeached. Kids on the border deserve to be tortured. This is the point I'm making. That he's found it all a little bit overwhelming, and he's doing a J. Alfred Prufrock. He really is. And then on top of that, the Kremlin says the release of Trump and Putin's calls need mutual consent. That's another. So they're obviously panicking about that. The Kremlin said Russia would have to give consent before transcripts of presidential phone calls between Trump and Putin could be published, after Democrats indicated that they would seek the records as part of an impeachment inquiry. The Kremlin said last week that it hoped the US wouldn't release transcripts of Trump's calls with Putin. Look, I wrote about this on the 5th of December 2016. We have a deviate tomahawk, I said. And I said my starting point is the election of President Trump, because hindsight will surely show that Russia ran a seriously sophisticated program of interference, mostly digital. I quoted Don DeLillo, the specialist is monitoring data on his mission console when a voice breaks in, a voice that carried with it a strange and unspecifiable poignancy. He checks in with his flight dynamics and conceptual paradigm officers at Colorado Command. We have a deviate tomahawk. We copy, there's a voice. We have gross oscillation here. There's some interference. I've gone redundant, but I'm not sure it's helping. We are clearing an outframe to locate source. Thank you, Colorado. It is probably just selective noise, your negative red on the step function quad. I don't know what that means, but it's just brilliant, isn't it? It was a voice, I told them. We have just received an affirm on selective noise. We will correct Tomahawk. In the meantime, advise you to stay redundant. The voice, in contrast to Colorado's metallic pigeon, is a melange of repartee, laughter and song, with the quality of the purest, sweetest sadness. I said in that article, I have no doubt that Putin ran a seriously 21st century, predominantly digital program of interference which amplified the Trump candidacy. Trump was an ideal candidate for this kind of support. He's a linguistic warfare specialist. Look at the names he gave his opponents. Low energy Jeb. He's going to have to give himself that name. They were devastating in terminal. And I said the first thing is plausible deniability. The second thing is non-linearity. If we start releasing these phone calls, plausible deniability is going to be eviscerated and non-linearity is going to go out the door. And then I was saying, look, traditional media was disrupted by this Putin digital interference. Insurgents can broadcast live and over the top. Trump's Twitter handle, for example, from feeding the hothouse conspiracy frenzy online, a constant state of destabilized perception. That's Vladislav Surkov. Timely and judicious doses of WikiLeaks leaks which drained Hillary's bona fides and her turnout and motivated Trump's. What we have witnessed is something remarkable and noteworthy. Putin has proven himself an information master and his adversaries his information victims. A year on from Jamal Khashoggi's murder and Saudi Arabia's lurching towards hysterical chaos, Robert Fisk in The Independent. This whole wretched saga is beginning to look less like war in the Middle East and more like carry on up the Gulf. That's brilliant. The Saudis are taking a pasting, indeed they are. Video pictures from the Houthis of Saudi soldiers and their allies killed or surrendering inside the Saudi border town of Najran represent a devastating blow to a kingdom which is constantly threatening war against Iran. If it can't protect its own armed forces inside Saudi territory, what is the point of wasting time menacing Iran with military action over the massive destruction of the oil facilities at Abqaiq and Kuros almost 2 weeks ago? Clearly, Saudi Arabia's own armed forces, clotted with jet fighters, missiles, American and British assistance, are as hopeless as they always were. Remember how they couldn't defend themselves from Saddam after his invasion of Kuwait in 1990, which brought a pageant of international armies to protect them. The Iranians may have concluded that Trump, in the immortal words of American columnist Nicholas Kristof, is the mother of all bunny rabbits. But it seems clear that Trump's decision to tear up US commitments under the Iranian nuclear deal is a colossal disaster. In fact, this whole wretched saga is beginning to look less like war in the Middle East and more like carry on up the Gulf. And saying that, we are supposed to take Iran seriously, but can this be done when its principal opponent, a kingdom which spoke of cutting off the head of the snake, behaves like a buffoon? It really is worth having a read in full. Meanwhile, stand by for the next episode of the Carry On Saga, another Saudi war of defiance. At the Islamic Republic, another oil tanker snaffled off to Bandar Abbas, more drones coming 30 at a time deep inside Saudi territory, or just more bombed wedding parties or prisoners' bodies in the dust of Yemen. I'd bank on the latter. It will be another attempt to destroy one of the poorest countries in the world by one of the world's richest. CBS News, Norah O'Donnell. Have a listen to this clip. Did you order the murder of Jamal Khashoggi? Asked of the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. Absolutely not, he said. This was a heinous crime, but I take full responsibility as a leader in Saudi Arabia, especially since it was committed by individuals working for the Saudi government, he said. Look, 16th of September, I said the overwhelming geopolitical question is around the longevity of the House of Saud and its Crown Prince, who is, of course, the proud owner of Leonardo da Vinci's Salvatore Mundi and means saviour of the world, which I'm sure he's under the impression he might well be. According to Robert Bayer, he has so many enemies, he sleeps on his $500 million yacht, the Serene, off Jeddah. And I was saying the much commented on orb is of no help now. If the Houthis attacked in the Saudi Shia, which they have, the House of Saud, I said, in my opinion, is on its last legs, or at least the Crown Prince's. And I said, this is a big call and needs to be understood for that. And that's why I'm bullish on oil, and notwithstanding the big dump yesterday, I'm buying it. And many of the oil watchers I follow are saying we must wait for the official Saudi statement. God, let me tell you this, it's worthless, it's irrelevant, it's paid for. If you're waiting for that, good grief. 23rd of September, I said my conclusion remains, we're at a peacock throne moment for the House of Saud. And that folks tend to miss inflection points, and therefore I have a supreme conviction around the oil markets, and I'm conducting my own operations and only on a need-to-know basis. The Shah of Shahs ended up in Panama, all on his lonesome, looking out to sea. And there is another fellow, not unlike the fictional Dean Jocelyn in The Spire, with a $500 million yacht called Serene, who will most likely be looking out to sea in the not too distant future. Maybe not in Panama, though Tommy prefers the Seychelles. Let's move on to the currency markets. Euro dollar 108.90, dollar index 99.545, girding its loins, going to cross 100 any time. Japanese yen 108.39. Swiss franc 0.9982, the pound 122.87, holding in there by its fingernails. The Australian dollar with a cut a quarter point, 0.6697. India rupee 70.663, South Korean won 11.9930, Brazilian real 4.1625, Egyptian pound, that's been a marvel, 16.2795 given the background to what's going on, but it tells me that really this is not a serious threat to CC. South African rand 15.1538 and headed to 15.50. The market here, this is a chart from them, euro continues the perfect channel down. We're last at 108.92. RBA cut interest rates to 0.75% from 1%. Look at this, it was at 16% once upon a time. WeWork to file request to withdraw its IPO prospectus. There is a super article that I've been reading in Zero Hedge. It popped up in Medium, but now it's taken off there, it's on Zero Hedge. WeWork is not a technology company in any way, shape or form. No income is derived from the sale of a product or service delivered by a technology. They owe $47 billion in lease commitments. So in a nutshell, this is what we know about this charade so far. This is extraordinary. They invented a brand new accounting principle which they called community-adjusted EBITDAs. For somebody that can't go a sentence without throwing in community twice, it's interesting he's never tweeted, his Instagram features 4 landscape Google images, and he's non-existent on LinkedIn. When I realized it was a technology company, I also realized that this company, through its technology, has the greatest capacity than any other company in the entire world to bring people together. He's using an actor, Ashton Kutcher, to convince people he's actors for real. The only reason it was valued at $47 billion is purely because one individual in Japan, bafflingly and solely, invested a total of $12 billion in 9 separate funding rounds, each at double the price and valuation, and he alone paid less than 6.5 months prior. Since SoftBank first invested in 2012, nobody else has invested. Why would Masayoshi, an intelligent individual, invest so many billions into this barefaced fraud? For the life of me, I can't figure it out. This is an Epstein-Mossad situation. It was only until the Saudis threatened to pull their funds out of the Vision Fund when Masayoshi reconsidered and decided to pull a further proposed investment of a whopping $16 billion, goodness, which would have brought the total amount invested in, borrowed by WeWork, to a laughable $30 billion, 15 times what Facebook raised. They raised $14 billion, have less than $1.5 billion in cash, and have nothing to show other than $47 billion in lease commitments and a portfolio of supersized Starbucks, which are beginning to look outdated. You've got to read this thing, it's incredible. The bonds have absolutely folded. This is a chart of the bond price from Holger. Let's move on to commodity markets. Gold just hanging there at 1460. This is a chart from Macro Tech RA. I think we're still going lower, and I must say, from previous podcasts, I never thought we'd get up here, but we did. Light crude trading heavily to the downside yesterday, and currently rebounding. We're now at 54.73, but this is pre-market trading. But I am bullish crude oil, and my reasons I've specified in my article on the 16th of September, which I've read to you several times. Drone strikes deep inside the kingdom. And then 23rd September, streaming dreams, non-linearity, crude oil, and Netflix. And by the way, I put out that buy on Netflix, and we're nearly back at the price at which I put the buy notice out, which is a bit of a relief. Fitch Ratings downgrades Saudi Arabia to A, outlook stable. The downgrade reflects rising geopolitical and military tensions in the Gulf region, vulnerability of Saudi Arabia's economic infrastructure, continued deterioration in Saudi Arabia's fiscal and external balance sheets. Recent drone and missile attacks on Saudi Arabia's oil infrastructure resulted in the temporary suspension of more than half of the country's oil production. They're saying it's all fully restored by the end of the last month, but I don't believe them. And as I said on the 23rd of September, my conclusion remains we're at a peacock throne moment for the House of Saud. Sub-Saharan Africa debt ratings at ESCOM have been cut further into junk bond territory by Fitch. South African all shares up 3.96% year to date. Dollar Rand 15.1538 headed towards 15.50. Egyptian pound 16.2798. EGX 30, what a rebound, 9.37% plus this year, having nearly got back to flat in the immediate aftermath of those recent events. Nigerian all share down 12.09% year to date. Ghana Stock Exchange down 11.78% year to date. Zimbabwe clamps down on mobile money in new currency directive, banning the purchase and sale of cash through the services in the latest directive aimed at gaining control of a monetary system that's spiraling out of control. Directive which the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe said was necessary because of commissions charged by agents follows a September 28th announcement enforcing the use of the Zimbabwe dollar and banning the quoting of prices in foreign currency. EcoCash, a mobile money service operated by Econet Wireless Zimbabwe Limited, has 6.7 million active users in a nation of about 14 million. It's the first time since its introduction in 2011 that users haven't been able to use the so-called cashback service. Since the Zimbabwe dollar was reintroduced in June, its value has plunged to 15.19 to the dollar from an initial rate of 2.5. 21st of January, so the point I'm seeking to make is that there is a correlation between high inflation and revolutionary conditions, and that Zimbabwe is a classic example. Then I quoted Yuval Noah. Money is accordingly a system of mutual trust, and not just any system of mutual trust. Money is the most universal and most efficient system of mutual trust ever devised. Cowrie shells and dollars have value only in our common imagination. Their worth is not inherent in the chemical structure of the shells and paper, or their color, or their shape. In other words, money isn't a material reality, it is a psychological construct. It works by converting matter into mind. And I said the mind game that ZANU-PF played on its citizens has evaporated in a puff of smoke. And then I take you back to October, when they spent $1.3 billion of cash they didn't have, trying to win the election, which they probably lost. And I said that was the straw that broke the camel's back of the economy. Kenya's economic growth slowed to 5.6% in the second quarter, previously expanding 6.4% in the same period a year earlier. They attributed the deceleration in growth to a slowdown in the key farming sector, which accounts for close to a third of output, manufacturing and transportation. Governor of the Central Bank, Patrick Jorogi, last week maintained a full-year growth forecast of 6%, citing robust bookings in the tourism sector. Look, nobody believes those numbers. This is the point. And have a read of this article, Business Daily, revisit our public spending problem to get a deeper insight into what people are thinking. Schools collapsing, healthcare struggling, business in the doldrums, road carnage, food insecurity. If we ever shall see any returns on President Kenyatta's Big Four agenda beyond fancy speeches at international meetings. And it's a very interesting article, quite hard-hitting, well worth a read. How Kenya bungled Somalia border talks. Somalia seeks to use Kenya's own statutes, among them the Territorial Waters Act 1972, the Maritime Zones Act 1989, and the Interpretation and General Provisions Act to advance its claim for about 150,000 square kilometres of maritime waters in the Indian Ocean. It really is an Inspector Clouseau level situation. I think we showed signs of naivete at the beginning. There are people who felt it was time to make money rather than pursue the interest of the country, said the source. Little Cabs is to cease offering a little shuttle bus services from October the 1st, which are used by thousands of riders every day in a move they link to public transport cartels, putting pressure on authorities. The Nairobi All shares are 3.58% year to date. The NSE 20 is down 14.18% year to date. Thank you for stopping by.